Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking at the sun like never before. Every single second, our star is blasting out this massive stream of energy and particles. We call it the solar wind. It washes over the planets, gives us those beautiful auroras, and drives space weather across our entire solar system. But believe it or not, exactly how the sun creates and controls this wind, well, that has actually remained one of the absolute biggest mysteries in astrophysics. So get ready, because today we're unwrapping a pretty fascinating scientific detective story that might finally give us the answers. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the 5 solar wind mysteries, the THD hypothesis explained, solving the 5 puzzles, testing the theory, and finally, why space weather matters. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, 5 solar winds mysteries. To really get this puzzle, we first need to establish our crime scene. The outer atmosphere of the sun, known as the corona, is basically this chaotic, boiling ocean of superheated plasma and twisting magnetic fields. And out of all that chaos, the solar wind is born. Now, for over 60 years, scientists have been completely baffled by 5 major unexplained observations. First up is acceleration. How does the wind suddenly speed up to over 1,000,000 miles per hour? It's wild. Second is the slow wind origin. We actually know where the fast wind comes from, but the slower wind has completely unclear starting points. Third, we have switchbacks. These are weird moments where the sun's magnetic fields literally violently bend backwards on themselves. Fourth is turbulent heating. The solar wind stays inexplicably hot even as it gets super far away from the sun, and that just defies simple physics. And fifth, energy discontinuities. There are these strange, sharp boundaries in the plasma where high-energy electrons seem to just randomly leak across.
So we've got 5 bizarre clues. One giant cosmic puzzle. For decades, traditional physics has mostly treated these as 5 completely separate, isolated problems. Scientists tried building 5 different models to explain 5 different anomalies. But what if they aren't separate problems at all?
Section 2. The THD hypothesis explained. This is where we shift from looking at the problem to a groundbreaking new solution. We are going to take a close look at a concept called triune harmonic dynamics, or THD for short. This is a unified threshold release hypothesis, and it was developed by researcher, inventor, and author Kevin L. Brown. His research suggests a completely new way to look at the sun's behavior, basically arguing that we've been looking at the puzzle the wrong way this entire time. Now think about the paradigm shift this represents. Instead of the old view, trying to solve 5 isolated, separate solar anomalies, the THD view gives us one highly connected threshold release pressure system. Kevin L. Brown's hypothesis states that these 5 mysteries are really just 5 symptoms of the exact same underlying process. The absolute easiest way to picture this is to think of a pressure cooker. As a pressure cooker heats up, steam builds more and more pressure inside, right? Eventually, it hits a critical limit, a threshold, and the steam violently escapes through the little release valve. According to the THD hypothesis, the sun works the exact same way. Magnetic pressure, thermal heat, and violent turbulence all build up stress in the sun's atmosphere. When that stress finally crosses an escape threshold, bam, the plasma is violently blasted out into the solar system. Section 3. Solving the 5 puzzles. Let's look at exactly how this single theory cleanly sweeps away all 5 puzzles. If you map the THD pressure release system against our mysteries, everything just suddenly clicks. Why the incredible acceleration? Well, because the plasma finally crosses that massive energy and magnetic threshold, shooting out like a cannon. And where does the slow wind originate? It comes from mixed regions on the sun that only release pressure intermittently rather than in one constant stream. What about those crazy bending switchbacks? Actually, those are just literal magnetic reversals happening right during the explosive release. The turbulent heating, that is simply wave energy cascading outward from the blast. And those sharp energy discontinuities, they are just the boundaries of these pressure tubes where high-energy particles occasionally leak across. So we have one structural cause, perfectly mapping to every single unexplained effect. Let's move to and see how this builds into a simple 3-step cycle that shows how the solar wind is actually born. Phase 1 is the base phase. This is where the plasma is just sitting in the sun's corona, organized by magnetic fields. Phase 2 is the pressure phase. Magnetic and thermal stress starts to aggressively build up, exactly like our pressure cooker. And finally, phase 3 is the integration phase. The threshold is broken, and plasma violently releases, transforming into that accelerated solar wind we observe. Section 4. Testing the theory. Now, as elegant as this all sounds, in science, you have to prove it.
So, how do we know if this is actually true? We obviously can't just walk up to the sun and check. Space science requires strict observable validation.
To validate the THD hypothesis, scientists are going to look for very specific confirmation signals using space probes. If this theory is correct, those weird magnetic switchbacks must heavily cluster in areas of high magnetic stress, basically right where our pressure cooker is popping. Second, if we use this new unified model, our errors in predicting solar wind speed should drastically drop. And third, those high-energy electrons shouldn't be leaking randomly anymore. They have to cross plasma boundaries in a predictable way tied directly to the pressure release. But there's another side to testing a theory. Rigorous science absolutely must be falsifiable. That means a true scientific hypothesis has to clearly state exactly what would prove it wrong. Kevin L. Brown purposely designed the THD model with strict falsification parameters, which, by the way, is the absolute gold standard of real scientific research. So the crucial point is this: the THD hypothesis is completely false if, when we look at the data, the solar wind speed doesn't actually correlate with the shape and stress of the magnetic fields, what scientists call magnetic topology. It's also false if switchbacks are just random and aren't tied to the turbulent pressure at all. And most importantly, it's false if this unified model doesn't actually predict the sun's behavior any better than the old isolated models did. It is a bold claim, but with really clear rules for failure. Section 5. Why space weather matters. Let's bring this cosmic science back down to Earth. Why does figuring out the solar wind actually matter to you and me? Well, this brilliantly illustrates the real-world high stakes of space weather. A unified, accurate model of the solar wind protects everyday human life. When the sun throws a massive tantrum, that extreme space weather hits Earth. It can knock out global GPS and navigation, ruin billion-dollar satellites, endanger the lives of astronauts in orbit, force commercial flights to reroute, and even blow out worldwide power grids, literally leaving millions of people in the dark. As the research states, quote, the model would allow solar wind properties to be predicted from source region structure before the wind reaches Earth, end quote. Guys, this is absolutely vital. Right now, we mostly just guess or react to space weather. But if the THD hypothesis is correct, we finally transition from guessing to confidently predicting a storm way before it ever hits us, which protects our modern infrastructure. So, to summarize our explainer today, the solar wind is not a random chaotic storm. Thanks to the THD hypothesis by Kevin L. Brown, we can begin to see it as a structured, highly predictable release system. It's really a beautiful harmonic process of pressure building up and then violently releasing across the solar system. By shifting our perspective, we turn 5 impossible mysteries into one elegant solution. Which leaves us with one final thought. If we can finally crack the code of the solar wind, what other cosmic mysteries are we now ready to solve? Keep wondering, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.